Oh dear, that's not good. Yes, there we are. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Library of Mythical Ireland. I'm Anthony Murphy. It is my great pleasure as an Ireland Reads ambassador for Louth Library Service to, for the next 3 hours, engage in the joy of reading live on the internet. This is a very special day. Delighted. Sorry, I just want to click off that. Yes, thank you. Delighted to be here as an ambassador for this occasion. I think it's a wonderful thing for Ireland, and of course, it doesn't matter if you're not in Ireland. We want you all reading as well. Pardon me. But anyway, loads of people in the house already. I think some commenters obviously coming across from YouTube. So that's great to see. Yeah, so I'm delighted, as I say, to join you all. Don't have a strict plan for this evening. I'm going to read from lots of books. And the reason I'm not going to read large sections of any book is because I do not want to breach copyright. I want to stay within the limits of the fair use clause under Irish copyright law. So I think that's a great opportunity to read lots of little bits and pieces from different books. Now, if you have suggestions, feel free to make them. Because I'll be reading, it's possible I will miss comments. So forgive me if I do, if I miss your comments. But look, this is a fantastic occasion. And I hope everything is okay from the point of view of the audio. I was having trouble on the last live stream I did. So hopefully, if you're having difficulty hearing me, do let me know. But hopefully it's okay. So I'm going to actually invite a very special guest into the library in about 15 or 20 minutes' time. The youngest of my children, Finn, who's 12 years old, is going to read something for you. So that'll be great. That was lined up today, and he's delighted. Thank you, Deborah Williams, for the sound check. And look, good evening to you all. I'm not going to do the usual sort of hellos to everybody, but I will do my very best to keep an eye on the comments, especially when it comes to anybody who's perhaps got suggestions for things that they want to hear. Can you hear the fan heater in the background? Maybe if you let me know. It's very slightly distracting for me, but if it's not distracting for you, I'll leave it on. I might switch it off after a while. Now, the other thing is, because this is a 3-hour live stream, it is quite possible that I will need a lavatory break at some stage. So I may have to leave the library for a few minutes. And if that happens, that's perfectly okay. I'll just leave the camera running. And no fan, says Deborah. That's brilliant. Okay, you can't hear that. That's all right. So if I have to leave for, and actually what I would suggest is that, if and when that occurs, so I'm just going to make a tiny adjustment to the camera. If and when that occurs, perhaps you will all get the opportunity yourselves. You might need to get up off the chair, you might need to go and boil the kettle for a cup of tea, or you might need a lavatory break yourself. So there you go. Tonight I'm actually going to start with something, and now for something completely different. I'm going to start with something that I read when I was in my late teens. And it was a book that greatly inspired me. And I think if you've read my work, especially if you've read Island of the Setting Sun, there's at least one or two quotes from this book in that. It's not that I'm a particular fan of the fantasy genre. And nowadays, I don't read much fiction, quite simply because I don't have the time. So I tend to read nonfiction. And the reason I tend to read a lot of nonfiction is for the purposes of research. And it's all part of the work that I do for Mythical Ireland. However, when I encountered J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, as I say, in my late teens, I started reading it. I had never read The Hobbit, by the way. I started reading it, and I just found myself, in a way, completely immersed in that magical world that Tolkien so wonderfully created. And today, years later, I am still in awe at what this great mind, this wonderful human being, was able to achieve. Now, of course, he was a professor of linguistics, and that helped. And he invented languages for the book, and the names and the landscape was so vivid and evocative. The other thing is that the book is so full of poetry and song, and he seems to have been particularly adept at basically making up songs and poems. So I suspect that, at the base of it all, Tolkien was, a poet as much as he was anything else. So I picked out two little brief sections from Lord of the Rings that I find very evocative. Now, if you've seen the movies, some of this stuff has been incorporated into the movies. The first one I'm going to read is from the chapter called The Departure of Boromir. And then I'm going to read a poem, which is it's some sort of a what's it called? A lament or an ode to the Rohirrim, the riders of Rohan. And in that case, that second one, the film, Peter Jackson's movies, I think it's the Two Towers. There's a hugely evocative scene with King Theoden being armed up for the battle. And he says some of those lines, and the music and the light streaming in through the window is just fabulous. Anyway, so we'll start. We'll make a beginning. And lots of books tonight. I'm going to pull all sorts of stuff off the shelves. But I'm starting tonight with Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Taking his axe, the dwarf now cut several branches. These they lashed together with bowstrings and spread their cloaks upon the frame. Upon this rough bier they carried the body of their companion to the shore, together with such trophies of his last battle as they chose to send forth with him. Of course, at this point, Boromir is dead and they're giving him a send-off. It was only a short way, yet they found it no easy task, for Boromir was a man both tall and strong. At the waterside, Aragorn remained, watching the bier, while Legolas and Gimli hastened back on foot to Parthgalen. It was a mile or more, and it was some time before they came back, paddling two boats swiftly along the shore. "There is a strange tale to tell," said Legolas. "There are only two boats upon the bank. We could find no trace of the other." "Have orcs been there?" asked Aragorn. "We saw no signs of them," answered Gimli, "and orcs would have taken or destroyed all the boats, and the baggage as well." "I will look at the ground when we come there," said Aragorn. And the next bit is the one that I just find one of the most evocative pieces of prose, filled with pathos and with emotion and melancholy. The sort of thing that almost brings you to tears when you read it. "Now they laid Boromir in the middle of the boat that was to bear him away. The grey hood and elven cloak they folded and placed beneath his head. They combed his long dark hair and arrayed it upon his shoulders. The golden belt of Lorien gleamed about his waist. His helm they sat beside him, and across his lap they laid the cloven horn and the hilts and shards of his sword. Beneath his feet they put the swords of his enemies. Then, fastening the prow to the stern of the other boat, they drew him out into the water. They rowed sadly along the shore, and turning into the swift-running channel, they passed the green sward of Parthgalen. The steep sides of Tolbrandir were glowing. It was now mid-afternoon. As they went south, the fume of Rauros rose and shimmered before them, a haze of gold. The rush and thunder of the falls shook the windless air. Sorrowfully they cast loose the funeral boat. There Boromir lay, restful, peaceful, gliding upon the bosom of the flowing water. The stream took him while they held their own boat back with their paddles. He floated by them, and slowly his boat departed, waning to a dark spot against the golden light, and then suddenly it vanished. And of course, Rauros is the great waterfall. Rauros roared on, unchanging. The river had taken Boromir, son of Denethor, and he was not seen again in Minas Tirith, standing as he used to stand upon the white tower in the morning. But in Gondor, in after days, it long was said that the elven boat rode the falls and the foaming pool, and bore him down through Osgiliath, and past the many mouths of Anduin, out into the great sea at night under the stars. And I just find it gets you, it nearly sort of, you feel a lump in the throat and you feel a tear coming to the eye. I remember when I read that, I just felt that, yes, at some point in my life, I want to write evocative, poetic prose like that, And the other one that I wanted to read is very short, but it's just the poem about the Rohirrim, which is told by Aragorn. But to the riders of the Mark, it seems so long ago, said Aragorn, that the raising of this house is but a memory of song, and the years before are lost in the mist of time. Now they call this land their home, their own, and their speech is sundered from their northern kin. Then he began to chant softly in a slow tongue, unknown to the elf and the dwarf. Yet they listened, for there was a strong music in it. That, I guess, is the language of the Rohirrim, said Legolas, for it is like to this land itself, rich and rolling in part, and else hard and stern as the mountains. But I cannot guess what it means, save that it is laden with the sadness of mortal men. It runs thus in the common speech, said Aragorn, as near as I can make it. Where now the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk, and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp string, and the red fire glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest, and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on a mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west, behind the hills, into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning? And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't read Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, there's an introduction to probably the most influential of all fiction writers of the 20th century. I could be mistaken, but it depends. It's a subjective thing, Anyway, good evening, everybody. So I should be, all going well, simultaneously live streaming on the Mythical Ireland Facebook page, on the Mythical Ireland Facebook community, and also on the tube, also on YouTube. Hopefully, no matter where you're watching, you can see and everything is all right. Wasn't that lovely? Wasn't it? Isn't that just the most beautiful writing? Okay, so the one thing that I did promise to do in my video to promote Ireland Reads was to read from Moncon McGann's 32 Words for Field, and I am going to do that. But again, I cannot read it to you for 3 hours. Pardon me, the principal reason being copyright. And, I'm conscious as an author that I wouldn't particularly be too happy if somebody was reading the entirety of my work on the internet, But small sections, yes, perfectly okay, because that's well within the rules, as they say. I may or may not use the glasses. Depends. When one is slightly advancing in years, we're all advancing in years at all times. One sometimes needs to use them. Sure, look, I'll read it from the beginning. Kaleidoscope is the name of the first chapter. There are 45 chapters, and it is a wonderful book. Really, really fabulous. So, there's no harm to give these things a plug either. So if you like it and you haven't got it, go and buy it. And better again, moncon.com, I think, is Moncon's website. If you order from him direct, I apologize, I'm having problems with my keyboard. If you order from Moncon direct, he'll send you a signed copy, even better again. It was my grandmother, Sheila Humphreys, who taught me Irish. And when I asked her one day what the word for a hole was, she replied, "Do you mean the one dug into the ground by an animal? That's an óchas. Or one made by fish in a sandy riverbed for spawning? That's a saothar. Or if it's been hollowed out by the hoofs of beasts and then filled with rain, it's a plubán. Or if a lobster is hiding in one, it's a fach. Or if it's been created as a hideaway by a wild beast, it's a pothash." That was the moment I realised that the two languages I spoke, Irish and English, required not just different forms of grammar and syntax, but different ways of seeing the world. I had already noticed that, when giving directions, I had to orient myself very differently, depending on the language. In Irish, I had to take account of the position of the sun. I couldn't say I was heading up the road, or back to someone's house, or into town. Instead, I would first situate myself in relation to the planet. I love that. I would be heading Shir o Yas, southwest, along the road, or Adui to the north, or Soerovalia eastwards home. Even when someone or something was just a little way off, such as a cow in the next field, I would say, "Tá an bhó chóir sa fork." The cow is in the field to the east. And I happen to think that is a habit of us Irish people that goes all the way back to the Neolithic, orienting yourself according to the earth and the directions and the cosmos. I just think that is wonderful. So I just wanted to check Moncon's website, moncon.com, MANCHAN.com. Later on, I learnt that there were many other words for holes, such as one dug into a bog, a creathar, or one made by an augur, a tarahar. I'm not sure, it depends on the inflections are a little bit different from place to place. A tarahar or tarahar, and a cup-like hole in a rock, a ballon. Lug, L-O-G, is a water-filled hole in the landscape. Crow, a hole in the eye of a needle, C-R-O fada. And spoil, a hole in the stern of a boat. Brefne, a tiny hole made by an insect or a needle, has its direct opposite in Duvachan, a hole so big that it can be classed as an abyss. Pluas, Shabe, Sluck, Cluish, and Lugan are all other possibilities, some more specific than others. Each can be translated into the English word hole, H-O-L-E, and perhaps it's efficient to do so, but I've always wondered what subtlety and nuance is lost, and whether the richness of the reality the Irish words describe would wane. Our landscape now looks like an increasingly anonymous expanse of indistinguishable fields. Yet seen through the Irish language, each field has its own word, depending on its characteristics and function. Giawer, Bámóg, Biorach, Machare, Búlia, Ingialtas, Domasach, Pócín, Fásach, Manyer, Caharín, Ré, Covran, Raylón, Cluam, Mím, Taunach, Buadán, Tor, Brannar, Plás, Rayan, Loiste, Coolín, Raylóg, Caván, Achu, Mothar, Plásóg, Luscán, Park, Mai. To a city dweller, this land may all look the same, and in English, each would probably be just referred to as a field. Yet, to someone to someone whose ancestors have been cultivating the land, growing grain and tending cattle for over 4,000 years, and who has built up the soil over centuries by hauling seaweed from the shore and burning limestone to add alkalinity, they look very different. Gower is a field of corngrass, Bjork is a marshy field, Branner is a fallow field. Coivran is a tilled field worked in partnership with a neighbour, Tuair a night field for cattle. Cloan is a meadow between two woods, and that's a very common word in Irish place names. Clonalva, Clon Alva, the meadow of Alva. Cluan is a meadow between two woods. Taunach, an arable field in an arid area. Raylon is a field for games or dancing. Plas is a level field for spreading flax or hay. Plasog, a sheltered field in which a mare would foal. Rayan, an upland field. Machara, a low-lying open field. Bulia, or a buli, as it is anglicised, is a field for keeping cattle before milking, or indeed bulia also means a field for summer pasture. Sometimes the bulies are up in the hills where the cattle are taken when the grass wouldn't be very plentiful in the winter, but maybe in the summer. Manyer is an enclosed field. Ray, a level field. Mean, a smooth, fine field. And Railog, an unenclosed patch of good land in the middle of a craig, C-R-E-F-A-I-G, a stonier area of limestone. Cohareen is a field with a fairy dwelling in it. Lusage, a neat, well-arranged field, is similar to Coolin, which is also neat, but smaller. Each of these words summons particular swathes of our landscape and the activities that happen on them. Some words even refer to fields in which something occasionally happened, but no longer does, such as a bánog, a patch of ground levelled out by years of dancing, among other things, or buadán, a hillside that once had gorse growing on it, but has since been cut with a scythe or hook, leaving only stumps. A hillside on which the gorse has been removed, not by cutting, but by burning, is a luscán. Having lived here for so long, we have perhaps inevitably become rooted to every aspect of this land, becoming entangled in its complex network of clay, sand, stone, weeds, worms, mycobacteria, flora, pollinators, and mycelium. But I hadn't realised how far back this connection stretched until my grandmother taught me a shan uckle, a proverb literally meaning old word, shan uckle, that shook my sense of time and space so much that I am contending with it to this day. Sail trivial vor sail umara awan, pardon my pronunciations, sail tri umara sail ondawan. These words meaning, quote, 3 times the life of a whale is the lifespan of a ridge, and 3 times the life of a ridge is the lifespan of the world, unquote. Encapsulate just how far back the knowledge contained within the language stretches on this island. A whale was thought to live for 1,000 years, although they lived for about a century. So it was known that the cultivation ridges that we see in the fields around us could be up to 3,000 years old. Archaeologists agree that there are indeed ridges of that age still visible in such places as the Céide Fields in County Mayo and Slieve Moor on Achill Island. The span of 3 cultivation ridges would amount to 9,000 years, which takes us back to the time when archaeologists believe significant numbers of humans first settled here, the beginning of our world. That our people appear to have kept account of how long we have been here, and that they encoded it in our language, is precious. My grandmother often pointed out the still visible cultivation ridges left by her great-grandparents' generation during the famine in the 1840s. Some were more visible than others, as they had been left undug. My ancestors either were too weak to dig then, or, having noticed the blight-rotted potato stems, had realised that there would be nothing but a slimy mush beneath the soil. I had been struck by the longevity of such memories, but it wasn't until I heard the proverb that I realised quite how far back these folk memories stretch. It appears, at least, as though we managed to keep some wispy thread of memory intact from our Neolithic forebears, who planted, weeded, and harvested along such ridges thousands of years ago. The knowledge is contained within the land, and over the years, I've realised that the best way to access it is through the language. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the first chapter of Moncalm McGann's wonderful 32 words for field, the first of 45 chapters. If you want to read the rest, you must purchase his wonderful book, and you'll be doing yourself an enormous favour if that is the case. So now I'm going to see if my young guest, I told him he would be welcome to participate early in the broadcast rather than late. I'm just checking to make sure everything's okay on the feeds. All good so far. Hope everybody's comfortable. Hang on, Clay. So here I am in the library, and I am going to send a message. Actually, I could do it on the phone because we have a family WhatsApp group. So there you go. I can summon my young guest. And so while Finn is reading, give him, of course, your devoted attention. But also you could perhaps make a couple of suggestions as to something that you might want to hear from the library. All in aid of celebrating Ireland Reads on today, which is the 25th of February, a new initiative. And I think it's a great one. Here is my young guest, and I will allow him to take the seat. Now, don't be shy. They don't bite, and they won't talk back. Now, just make sure that. Hang on, Clyde. Just make a slight adjustment to that camera, so that they want to see your lovely face, as well as hear your voice. So, tell them what you're going to read.
I am going to read Daffodils by William Wordsworth.
Okay, I'll leave you to it.
I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay. In such a jocund company I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart fills with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils.
Well done, Finn. Brilliant. Thank you. A little bit of Wordsworth. Excellent. Well done. There you go. The 12-year-old star of the show, Finn, who decided he would read some Wordsworth to us. Daffodils, no less. Wow. So, yeah, very good. Yeah, brilliant stuff. Chip off the old block, eh? Okay, I haven't seen any suggestions flashing up in front of me just yet. So I'm going to read the introduction, or part of the introduction, from a very, very significantly influential work that I have no doubt that many of you who are interested in mythology will have heard of. Sorry, I should announce that it's The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. And he's Campbell, if you've ever seen any of his lectures on YouTube, and there's tons of stuff out there, he was such a wonderful scholar and a wonderful interpreter of mythology, making it come alive and making it relevant for us in the modern era. There you go. Yes, just John Garvey makes the point that just as the daffodils are about to pop. That time of year, really, yes, indeed. Excuse me. So this is Myth and Dream from Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Whether we listen with aloof amusement to the dreamlike mumbo-jumbo of some red-eyed witch doctor of the Congo, or read with cultivated rapture thin translations from the sonnets of the mystic Lao Tse, now and again crack the hard nutshell of an argument of Aquinas, or catch suddenly the shining meaning of a bizarre Eskimo fairy tale, it will be always the one shape-shifting yet marvellously constant story that we find, together with a challengingly persistent suggestion of more remaining to be experienced than will ever be known or told. Gillian Stapleton, I'm actually ashamed to say I don't have any Alan Garner on the shelves. I know. That's a deficiency I will have to address. Throughout the inhabited world, in all times and under every circumstance, the myths of man have flourished. And they have been the living inspiration of whatever else may have appeared out of the activities of the human body and mind. It would not be too much to say that myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into human cultural manifestation. Religions, philosophies, arts, the social forms of primitive and historic man, prime discoveries in science and technology, the very dreams that blister sleep, boil up from the basic magic ring of myth. Isn't that wonderful? Again, Campbell, for somebody who was ostensibly a scientist, was so much a poet as well. Fabulous stuff. The wonder is that the characteristic efficacy to touch and inspire deep creative centres dwells in the smallest nursery fairy tale, as the flavour of the ocean is contained in a droplet, or the whole mystery of life within the egg of a flea. For the symbols of mythology are not manufactured. They cannot be ordered, invented, or permanently suppressed. They are spontaneous productions of the psyche, and each bears within it, undamaged, the germ power of its source. What is the secret of the timeless vision? From what profundity of the mind does it derive? Why is mythology everywhere the same, beneath its varieties of costume? And what does it teach? Today, many sciences are contributing to the analysis of the riddle. Archaeologists are probing the ruins of Iraq, Honan, Crete, and Yucatan. Ethnologists are questioning the Ostiacs of the River Ob, the boobies of Fernando Po. A generation of Orientalists has recently thrown open to us the sacred writings of the East, as well as the pre-Hebrew sources of our own holy writ. And meanwhile, another host of scholars pressing researches begun last century in the field of folk psychology has been seeking to establish the psychological bases of language, myth, religion, art development, and moral codes. I should also mention to you that this was first published, the Hero with a Thousand Faces was first published in 1949. So this is 72 years ago. Mandy McCurl wants Da Derg as hostile. Something from it. Okay. Yes. Okay. The most remarkable of all, however, are the revelations that have emerged from the mental clinic. The bold and truly epoch-making writings of the psychoanalysts are indispensable to the student of mythology. For whatever may be thought of the detailed and sometimes contradictory interpretations of specific cases and problems, Freud, Jung, and their followers have demonstrated irrefutably that the logic, the heroes, and the deeds of myth survive into modern times. In the absence of an effective general mythology, each of us has his private, unrecognized, rudimentary, yet secretly potent pantheon of dream. The latest incarnation of Oedipus, the continued romance of Beauty and the Beast, stand this afternoon on the corner of 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, waiting for the traffic light to change. I dreamed, wrote an American youth, to the author of a syndicated newspaper feature, that I was reshingling our roof. Suddenly I heard my father's voice on the ground below, calling to me. I turned suddenly to hear him better, and as I did so, the hammer slipped out of my hands and slid down the sloping roof and disappeared over the edge. I heard a heavy thud, as of a body falling. Terribly frightened, I climbed down the ladder to the ground. There was my father, lying dead on the ground, with blood all over his head. I was broken-hearted and began calling my mother in the midst of my sobs. She came out of the house and put her arms around me. "Never mind, son, it was all an accident," she said. "I know you will take care of me, even if he is gone." As she was kissing me, I woke up. I am the eldest child in our family, and am 23 years old. I have been separated from my wife for a year. Somehow, we could not get along together. I love both my parents dearly, and have never had any trouble with my father, except that he insisted that I go back and live with my wife, and I couldn't be happy with her, and I never will. The unsuccessful husband here reveals, with a really wonderful innocence, that instead of bringing his spiritual energies forward to the love and problems of his marriage, he has been resting in the secret recesses of his imagination with the now ridiculously anachronistic dramatic situation of his first and only emotional involvement, that of the tragicomic triangle of the nursery, the son against the father for the love of the mother. Apparently, the most permanent of the dispositions of the human psyche are those that derive from the fact that, of all animals, we remain the longest at the mother's breast. Human beings are born too soon, they are unfinished, unready as yet to meet the world. Consequently, their whole defence from a universe of dangers is the mother, under whose protection the intrauterine period is prolonged. Hence, the dependent child and its mother constitute, for months after the catastrophe of birth, a dual unit, not only physically, but also psychologically. Any prolonged absence of the parent causes tension in the infant and consequent impulses of aggression. Also, when the mother is obliged to hamper the child, aggressive responses are aroused. Thus, the first object of the child's hostility is identical with the first object of its love and its first ideal, which thereafter is retained in the unconscious basis of all images of bliss, truth, beauty, and perfection, is that of the dual unity of the Madonna and the Bambino. The unfortunate father is the first radical intrusion of another order of reality into the beatitude of this earthly restatement of the excellence of the situation within the womb. He, therefore, is experienced primarily as an enemy. This, of course, I think is Campbell's way of describing the Oedipus complex. To him is transferred the charge of aggression that was originally attached to the bad or absent mother, while the desire attaching to the good or present, nourishing and protective mother, she herself normally retains. This fateful infantile distribution of death, thanatos, destrudo, and love, eros, libido, impulses, builds the foundation of the now celebrated Oedipus complex, which Sigmund Freud pointed out some 50 years ago as the great cause of our adult failure to behave like rational beings. Pardon me. As Dr. Freud has stated it, King Oedipus, who slew his father Laius and married his mother Jocasta, merely shows us the fulfillment of our own childhood wishes. But more fortunate than he, we have meanwhile succeeded insofar as we have not become psychoneurotics in detaching our sexual impulses from our mothers and in forgetting our jealousy of our fathers. Or, as he writes again, every pathological disorder of sexual life is rightly to be regarded as an inhibition in development. For many a man hath seen himself in dreams, his mother's mate, but he who gives no heed to such like matters bears the easier fate. The sorry plight of the wife of the lover, whose sentiments, instead of maturing, remain locked in the romance of the nursery, may be judged from the apparent nonsense of another modern dream. And here we begin to feel indeed that we are entering the realm of ancient myth, but with a curious turn, etc., etc., etc. And probably a great indication of how inspiring Campbell's work has been for me anyway, personally, are the number of highlighted passages and the number of pencil marks in the margins of the hero with 1,000 faces. You must forgive me for reaching over the camera. I do apologize for all that. The destruction of Durga's hostel. Where did we read that? I know Stokes' version is a bit archaic. So if you don't make a request, sorry, I should first say that I only take requests when I'm asked. Yes. I think that might be. I think that might be cross and slow. Oh, don't do that. Let me just have a look. I hope I'm right now, because if not, it'll have to be. Yes, here we go. It would have to be Stokes' version with its archaic English. And that's where daffodils come from, says the garden prophet. Yes. So I'll pick out a random passage, will I? Yeah, because, I mean, it took us 4 episodes of Live Irish Myths to recount this tale in full. The longest tale, I think, I have told in 139 episodes. We've done 2 episodes and we've done 3, but the destruction of Durga's hostel remains to this day to be the only one that took 4 episodes. So there you go. Anyway, I hope you're all enjoying yourselves and that you're comfortable. I know that it's a little bit difficult. None of you can really read when you're listening. So if you want to pop off and do your own reading, by all means, there's absolutely nothing rooting you to the spot about this. Irish technical thinkers in the house. I just want to check the Mythical Ireland community because I don't see its comments here on the Melon app for some reason that I haven't figured out yet. Marion Thomas Ibarra says, precious heart. Yes. Hi, Marion, and good evening to you. I hope you're enjoying the reading. Very glad to help, Grace, if it helps at all. And hopefully we can pick your spirits up a little bit. Oh, there's a question. Oh, that's a tricky one. Can you think of any Oedipus-like stories in Irish myth? You'll have to let me think about that one. Not immediately offhand, actually. Yeah, memory of Kelly, our late friend, Kelly Edmiston, who sadly passed away last month. Yeah. In memory of Kelly. Now there were in Conora's reign great bounties, to wit, 7 ships in every June of every year arriving at Inverculpa, and that's the estuary of the Boyne, and Oakmast up to the knees every autumn, and plenty of fish in the river's Bush and Boyne in June of each year, and such abundance of goodwill that no one slew another in Erin during his reign. Wow, apparently nobody killed anybody when Conor O'More was High King of Ireland. And to every one in Erin his fellow's voice seemed as sweet as the strings of lutes. From mid-spring to mid-autumn, no wind disturbed a cow's tail. His reign was neither thunderous nor stormy. Now his foster brothers murmured at the taking from them of their fathers and their grandsires' gifts, namely theft and robbery and slaughter of men and rapine. They thieved the 3 thefts from the same man, a swine and an ox and a cow, every year, that they might see what punishment therefore the king would inflict upon them, and what damage the theft in his reign would cause to the king. Every year the farmer would come to the king to complain, and the king would say to him, Go thou and address Dundessa's 3 sons, for 'tis they that have taken the beasts. Whenever he went to speak to them, they would almost kill him, and he would not return to the king, lest Conora should add to his hurt. Since then pride and wilfulness possessed them, they took to marauding, surrounded by the sons of the lords of the men of Erin. Thrice 50 men had they as pupils, who in the form of werewolves were destroying in the province of Connacht. until Mane Milscohach's swineherd saw them, and he had never seen that before. He fled in fright. When they heard him, they pursued him. The swineherd shouted, and the people of the two mains came to him, and the thrice 50 men were arrested along with their auxiliaries and taken to Tara. They consulted the king concerning the matter, and he said, "Let each father slay his son, but let my foster brothers be spared." Let be, said everyone. You shall be obeyed. But mind you, said he, there is no lengthening of life in the judgment I have delivered. The men shall not be hanged, but let veterans go with them in banishment, that they may wreak their rapine on the men of Scotland and Britain. This they did. They put to sea and met the son of the king of Britain, even Inchael the one-eyed, grandson of Conmac. Thrice 50 men and their veterans they met upon the sea. They made an alliance and went with Inchael and wrought rapine with him. This was the destruction which Inchael did of his own will. On a certain night, his mother and his father and his 7 brothers had been bidden to the house of the king of his district. All of them were destroyed by Inchael in a single night. Then the Irish pirates put to sea to the land of Erin to inflict equal destruction upon their own people as payment for that to which Inchael had been entitled from them. In Conora's reign there was perfect peace in Erin, save that in Thomond there was a battle between the two Carbres. 2 foster brothers of his were they, and until Conora came, it was impossible to make peace between them. 'Twas a taboo of his to go to separate them before they had appealed to him. He went, however, although to do so was one of his taboos, and he made peace between them. He remained 5 nights with each of the 2. That also was a taboo of his. After settling the quarrel, he was travelling to Tara. The way he took to Tara was past Ishnach in Meath, and he saw raiding from east and west and from south and north. And he saw war bands and hosts, and men stark naked, and the land of the southern O'Neills was a cloud of fire around him. "What is this?" asked Conora. "Easy to say," his people answered. "Easy to know that the king's law has broken down therein, since the country has begun to burn." "Whither shall we betake ourselves?" said Conora. "To the northeast," said his people. So then they went right-hand-wise around Tara, and left-hand-wise around Mybray. And the evil hosts of Kerna were hunted by him, but he saw it not till the chase had ended. They that made of the world that smoky mist of magic were the fairy folk, and they did so because Conora's taboos had been violated. And for the rest of the story, you can go to the YouTube channel, Mythical Ireland, and find our 4 episodes of Live Irish Myths featuring the destruction of Dardaragh's hostel. What about one of Anthony's favourite non-Irish myths, a myth from another culture? Oh, that would have to be. Let me just. Oh, now you've opened the pot. Now you've opened the can of worms. Let me just try to find. Bear with me for a moment. This is undoubtedly going to be from Greek mythology. But I was thinking about. Just let me find it first. This is the thing about being live. You know, I didn't line this up beforehand. Sorry. Just have to find it first. It could take me a couple of minutes to find it. can't find it now. I was going to suggest that I might read about Hercules killing the Hydra. Heracles. The second labour, well, this is just one of a number. Leda, Zeus and Leda is another. I would love to read one or two. Actually, if it's okay, can I read two? Can I read a little snippet if I can find it now? I just have to find it in the library. Could I read a little bit from the Dreamtime, from the Aboriginal mythology? I have a book of the Dreamtime myths, if I can find it. I'd love to do that, you know. The second labour, ordered by... I have to say, I thought I was bad at pronouncing some Irish words. Eurystheus was the destruction of the Lernaean Hydra, a monster born to Typhon and Echidna, and reared by Hera as a menace to Heracles. Lerna stands beside the sea, some 50 miles from the city of Argos. To the west rises Mount Pontinus, with its sacred grove of plane trees stretching down to the sea. In this grove, bounded on the one flank by the river Pontinus, beside which Danaus dedicated a shrine to Athena, and on the other by the river Amymone, stand images of Demeter, Dionysos the Saviour, and Proserpine, one of Hera's nurses, and on the shore a stone image of Aphrodite, dedicated by the Danaids. Every year, secret nocturnal rites are held at Lerna in honour of Dionysos, who descended to Tartarus at this point when he went to fetch Semele. And not far off, the mysteries of Lernaean Demeter are celebrated in an enclosure which marks this place where Hades and Persephone also descended into Tartarus. This fertile and holy district was once terrorized by the Hydra, which had its lair beneath a plane tree at the sevenfold source of the river Amymone, and haunted the unfathomable Lernaean swamp nearby. The Emperor Nero recently tried to sound it and failed, the grave of many an incautious traveller. The Hydra had a prodigious dog-like body and 8 or 9 snaky heads, one of them immortal, but some credit it with 50 or 100 or even 10,000 heads. At all events, it was so venomous that its very breath or the smell of its tracks could destroy life. Athena had pondered how Heracles might best kill this monster, and when he reached Lerna, driven there in his chariot by Iolaus, she pointed out the Hydra's lair to him. On her advice, he forced the Hydra to emerge by pelting it with burning arrows, and then held his breath while he caught hold of it. But the monster twined round his feet in an endeavour to trip him up. In vain did he batter at its heads with his club. No sooner was one crushed than 2 or 3 more grew in its place. An enormous crab scuttered from the swamp to aid the Hydra and nipped Heracles' foot. Furiously crushing its shell, he shouted to Iolaus for assistance. Iolaus set one corner of the grove alight, and then, to prevent the Hydra from sprouting new heads, seared their roots with blazing branches. Thus, the flow of blood was checked. What's that we call that? What's that in medical terminology? Cauterizing, isn't it? Now, using a sword or a golden falchion, Heracles severed the immortal head, part of which was of gold, and buried it, still hissing, under a heavy rock beside the road to Elias. The carcass he disemboweled and dipped his arrows in the gall. Henceforth, the least wound from one of them was invariably fatal. In reward for the crab's services, Hera set its image among the 12 signs of the zodiac, and Eurystheus would not count this labour as duly accomplished because Iolaus had supplied the firebrands. There you go. And that is Heracles' defeat of the Lernaean Hydra. Yes. Let me just see if I can briefly find the book, The Dream Time. It's a while since I've read it. Just let me see if I can put my hands on it now. Dream Time. Singing to let you know I'm still here. I do apologise. The library stretches all the way down that way. Damn. Well, at least I'm getting an opportunity to stretch my legs. Can't find it. Damn. It's one of those things, you know what, I bet you any money when I'm finished, like within a minute of finishing this live stream, I'll find it. Yes! It might have taken 10 minutes. I found it. Desiree, that's the funniest comment of the night so far. I'm getting Anthony to read my bills out to me, so maybe it'll be less depressing, more interesting. Yes. Now, yeah. Let's read a couple of the Dreamtime myths. Oh man, this stuff is just fabulous. This one is called, so just in case you want to know, it's the Dreamtime. Australian Aboriginal Myths in Paintings by Ainsley Roberts with text by Charles P. Mountford. Just in case you're looking for this book yourselves. The Sun Woman and the Moon Man. Life was difficult for the Aborigines when the world was young, for, having neither light nor heat, the people were forced to search for their food in the darkness, and having found it, had to eat it raw. One day, Purukupali, the first man in the world, and his companion, Japara, were rubbing two sticks together just to see what would happen when, by chance, they found out the way to make fire. Purukupali, realizing that they had discovered something that would dispel the darkness and also give heat for the Aborigines to cook their food and to keep themselves warm, gave a large torch of blazing bark to his sister, Worthy of Pranala, and a smaller one to his friend Japara, telling them that whatever happened, they must always keep those torches burning. When the creation period came to an end, and the mythical people were transformed into creatures, plants, and natural forces, Warrior Pranala became the Sun Woman, and Japara became the Moon Man. In the morning, when the Sun Woman rises in the east with her torch of blazing bark, the Aborigines leave their camps to collect food from the jungle, plain, and sea coast. As the sun reaches its zenith, Warrior Pranala, lighting a fire to cook her food, makes the day so hot that the Aborigines retire to the shade of the trees. About mid-afternoon, they continue their food gathering until the Sun Woman disappears over the western horizon. It is then that the Moon Man, Japara, with the smaller torch, makes his journey across the sky to overcome the darkness of the night. Isn't that beautiful? And there is one of those beautiful paintings by Ainsley Roberts. So I'll just line that up so you can see that properly. The Sun Woman and the Moon Man. Isn't that just gorgeous? Isn't it fabulous? Yeah. Okay, one more. Let me just find. Let me just scroll through briefly. Hope you're all, as I said earlier, hope you're all comfortable. You're all sitting comfortably, that you have some nice brew, or perhaps you have a dram. I might, before the reading is out, I might pour myself a glass of vino, you know. Let me just find something else. Oh, this is wonderful, wonderful. The creation of the eagle and the crow. Mullian, an eagle man whose camp was on the banks of the River Murray, once married a beautiful girl of the Crow tribe, who bore him a son, of whom he was very proud. But one day he saw his wife talking to a magpie man, whose behaviour was not above suspicion, and, being a jealous man, Mullian punished his wife so severely that she died. When Juan, the Crow man, heard that Mullian had killed his sister, he was furious and plotted to avenge her death. But knowing, obviously, Mullian's wife was a sister of the Crow man. But knowing that the Eagle man was both powerful and clever, he decided to act by guile rather than by force. So he waited until his nephew was a well-grown child before he sought revenge. One day, Juan arrived at the Eagle man's camp, footsore and weary, and asked to be allowed to rest for a while, a request that was readily granted. But when Mullian had gone out hunting, the Crow man speared Mullian's son. Then, by trampling down the bushes, he made it appear that several men had been taking part in the killing. Later, Juan told the Eagle man how a number of men had attacked the camp without warning and killed his son before they disappeared. Although the keen eye of the Eagle man recognized that all the tracks belonged to the Crow man, he gave no sign that he had detected the lie, but sorrowfully asked the Crow man if he would dig a deep grave for the dead child. When the grave was dug and Juan was at the bottom of it, arranging the dead body, the Eagle man pushed all the earth into the grave and stamped it down. Then he returned to his camp, certain that he had killed the Crow man. But Mullian was mistaken, for the Crow man, using his magic, had escaped and called up a heavy thunderstorm that increased in violence, until a great flash of lightning struck the camp of the Eagle man, scattering its fragments everywhere. Just as Juan was rejoicing at the success of his revenge, he saw Mullian rise into the sky and fly away in the form of an eagle hawk. Nor did the Crow man escape, for the lightning flash had so scorched his feathers that even today all crows are as black as night. There you go. Good evening, everyone who has been joining of late. We are reading live for 3 hours as to celebrate Ireland Reads. I am an ambassador for this occasion on behalf of Louth Library Service. It's my great pleasure to do so. And I am taking live requests. So if you want to, if you want me to read something, shout. I'm going to find something right now to read while you think about your requests. Where did I find that now? I'm very careful to put things back where they belong. I also now want to read a small section. I don't know which section because I didn't prepare this one, but I want to read a small section from another book that, as a young astronomer, I found exceptionally inspiring and written by a brilliant man whose name I hope you will all recognize, and that is the wonderful Carl Sagan and his book Cosmos, which accompanied the TV series. But I can tell you, having seen some episodes of it, that really the TV series is not a shade on the book. Oh, this is another guy who is ostensibly a scientist or a science writer, whose writing is exceptionally poetic, So this is from chapter 1 of Cosmos, and it's called The Shores of the Cosmic Ocean. And let me just make sure that everybody's okay. Can you sing us something? Oh my God, you don't want... No, I mean, there are a few people watching. I don't want to drive them all away by singing Desiree. What madness would I engage in to do that kind of thing? I could tell some jokes, but, you'll be slapping your head so much that I don't have anything by Michael D. Higgins. That's a good question. The Full Irish. I actually don't think I have anything that he has written in my library. Another severe deficiency that must be righted before too long. So I hope everybody, as I said, is comfortable. We are now into our second hour. We've begun, we're over an hour now. So don't forget, if you have specific requests, please, by all means. I've tons of stuff. Can you read the Amergin poem, says Joan. I'll do better than that, Joan. It's in Return to Segish. Some of it is anyway. I will read it. Oscailga agus osperla. I will read it in Irish and in English. How's that? Huh? Right, I'll read a little bit of Carl Sagan. This is wonderful stuff. The cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be. Our feeblest contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There is a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation, as if a distant memory of falling from a height. We know we are approaching the greatest of mysteries. The size and age of the cosmos are beyond ordinary human understanding. Lost somewhere between immensity and eternity is our tiny planetary home. In a cosmic perspective, most human concerns seem insignificant, even petty. And yet our species is young and curious and brave and shows much promise. In the last few millennia, we have made the most astonishing and unexpected discoveries about the cosmos and our place within it. Explorations that are exhilarating to consider. They remind us that humans have evolved to wonder, that understanding is a joy, that knowledge is prerequisite to survival. I believe our future depends on how well we know this cosmos in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky. See how wonderfully poetic a writer he is. It's fabulous. I couldn't believe it when I read this. Like, where have you been all my life, Carl Sagan? These explorations required skepticism and imagination both. Imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were. But without it, we go nowhere. Skepticism enables us to distinguish fancy from fact, to test our speculations. The cosmos is rich beyond measure in elegant facts, in exquisite interrelationships, in the subtle machinery of awe. The surface of the earth is the shore of the cosmic ocean. From it, we have learned most of what we know. Recently, we have waded a little out to sea, enough to dampen our toes or at most wet our ankles. The water seems inviting. The ocean calls. Some part of our being knows this is from where we came. We long to return. These aspirations are not, I think, irreverent, although they may trouble whatever gods may be. The dimensions of the cosmos are so large that using familiar units of distance, such as meters or miles, chosen for their utility on Earth, would make little sense. Instead, we measure distance with the speed of light. In 1 second, a beam of light travels 186,000 miles, nearly 300,000 kilometers, or 7 times around the Earth. In 8 minutes, it will travel from the Sun to the Earth. We can say the Sun is 8 light minutes away. In a year, it crosses nearly 10 trillion kilometers, about 6 trillion miles of intervening space. That unit of length, the distance light goes in a year, is called a light year. It measures not time, but distances, enormous distances. The Earth is a place. It is by no means the only place. It is not even a typical place. No planet or star or galaxy can be typical because the cosmos is mostly empty. The only typical place is within the vast, cold universal vacuum, the everlasting night of intergalactic space. A place so strange and desolate that, by comparison, planets and stars and galaxies seem achingly rare and lovely. If we were randomly inserted into the cosmos, the chance that we would find ourselves on or near a planet would be less than 1 in a billion trillion. That is 10 to the power of 33, a 1 followed by 33 zeros. In everyday life, such odds are called compelling. Worlds are precious. Oh. Sagan. Helen. Yes, we're all jealous of Helen. Yeah. Sagan. Such a wonderful scientist, such a wonderful human being. Wonderful writer. Cosmos by Carl Sagan. So, my live stream is what you might call an open book. Let me just briefly think. We have read a little bit of. I'm going to read a little bit of George William Russell. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the last chapter of The Candle of Vision. And I mentioned this in yesterday's live stream because, as I said, by coincidence, happy coincidence, the navy blue Wibbelin is the material that Return to Segish is being printed on with the gold inlay, the gold foil inlay. So this is called Earth, and there's a lovely poem at the end of it that you may know from previous broadcasts that I'm very, very fond of. Earth by George William Russell, otherwise known as A.E. I think of Earth as the floor of a cathedral where altar and presence are everywhere. This reverence came to me as a boy listening to the voice of birds one coloured evening in summer, when suddenly birds and trees and grass and tinted air and myself seemed but one mood or companionship, and I felt a certitude that the same spirit was in all. A little breaking of the barriers and being would mingle with being. Whitman writes of the earth that it is rude and incomprehensible at first. Quote, but I swear to you, unquote, he cries, quote, that there are divine things well hidden, unquote. Yet they are not so concealed that the lover may not discover them. And to the lover, nature reveals herself like a shy maiden who is slowly drawn to one who adores her at a distance and who is first acknowledged by a lifting of the veil. A long-remembered glance, a glimmering smile, and at last comes speech and the mingling of life with life. So the lover of earth obtains his reward, and little by little the veil is lifted of an inexhaustible beauty and majesty. It may be he will be entranced in some spiritual communion, or will find his being overflowing into the being of the elements, or become aware that they are breathing their life into his own. Or earth may become on an instant all fairy to him, and earth and air resound with the music of its invisible people. Or the trees and rocks may waver before his eyes and become transparent, revealing what creatures were hidden from him by the curtain, and he will know, as the ancients did, of Dryad and Hamadryad, of Genii, of wood and mountain. Or earth may suddenly blaze about him with supernatural light in some lonely spot amid the hills, and he will find he stands as the prophet in a place that is holy ground, and he may breathe the intoxicating exhalations as did the Sibyls of old. Or his love may hurry him away in dream to share in deeper mysteries, and he may see the palace chambers of nature where the wise ones dwell in secret, looking out over the nations, breathing power into this man's heart or that man's brain, on any who appear to their vision to wear the colour of truth. So gradually the earth lover realizes the golden world is about him in imperishable beauty, and he may pass from the vision to the profounder beauty of being, and know an eternal love is within and around him, pressing upon him and sustaining with infinite tenderness his body, his soul, and his spirit. I have obscured the vision of that being by dilating too much on what was curious, but I desired to draw others to this meditation, if by reasoning it were possible to free the intellect from its own fetters, so that the imagination might go forth, as Blake says, in uncurbed glory. So I stayed the vision which might have been art, or the ecstasy which might have been poetry, and asked of them rather to lead me back to the ancestral fountain from which they had issued. I think by this meditation we can renew for ourselves the magic and beauty of earth, and understand the meaning of things in the sacred books which had grown dim. We have so passed away from vital contact with divine powers that they have become for most names or the veriest abstractions, and those who read do not know that the mighty mother is that earth on which they tread and whose holy substance they call common clay, or that the paraclete is the strength of our being, the power which binds atom to atom and earth to heaven, or that the Christos is the magician of the beautiful, and that it is not only the architect of the God world, but is that in us which sees beauty, creates beauty, and it is verily wisdom in us and is our deepest self. Or that the Father is the fountain of substance and power and wisdom, and that we could not lift an eyelash, but that we have our being in him. When we turn from books to living nature, we begin to understand the ancient wisdom, and it is no longer an abstraction, for the great spirit whose home is in the vast becomes for us a moving glamour in the heavens, a dropping tenderness at twilight, a visionary light in the hills, a voice in the heart, The earth underfoot becomes sacred, and the air we breathe is like wine poured out for us by some heavenly cup-bearer. As we grow intimate with earth, we realize what sweet and august things await humanity when it goes back to that forgotten mother. Who would be ambitious? Who would wish to fling a name like Caesar's in the air, if he saw what thrones and majesties awaited the heavenly adventurer? Who would hate if we could see beneath the husk of the body the spirit which is obscured and imprisoned there, and how it was brother to his own spirit, and all were children of the King? Who would weary of nature, or think it a solitude, once the veil had been lifted for him, once he had seen that great glory? Would they not long, all of them, for the coming of that divine hour of in the twilights of time, when out of rock, mountain, water, tree, bird, beast, or man, the seraph spirits of all that live shall emerge, realizing their kinship, and all together, fierce things made gentle, and timid things made bold, and small made great, shall return to the Father being, and he made one in its infinitudes. When we attain this visionary nature, vision nature will melt magically before our eyes, and powers that seemed dreadful, things that seemed abhorrent in her, will reveal themselves as brothers and allies. Until then, she is unmoved by our conflicts and will carry on her ceaseless labours. And he ends with 5 stanzas of a beautiful poem, which I should know by heart, so I will try not to have to read it. No sign is made while empires pass. The flowers and stars are still his care. The constellations hid in grass, the golden miracles in air. Life in an instant will be rent when death is glittering, blind and wild. The heavenly brooding is intent to that last instant on its child. It breathes the glow in brain and heart. Life is made magical until body and spirit are apart. The everlasting works its will. In that wild orchid that your feet in their next falling shall destroy, minute and passionate and sweet, the mighty master holds his joy. Though the crushed jewels droop and fade, the artist's labours will not cease, and from the ruins shall be made some yet more lovely masterpiece. Thank you, George William Russell, for being such a momentous force of nature, a spiritual force, an incredible, incredible being. I must insist, I'm not seeing any comments, so either everybody's sort of gone off to make tea or everybody's completely spellbound. Elizabeth Long is watching on Facebook. I'm not sure if I saw your comment here. Just not sure that all the comments are feeding up here, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on everything. Hello, Elizabeth. The pale blue dot, says Anne McCallum. Yes, indeed. One of what's his name? Sagan's most famous utterings. By the way, if you're not interested in trying to secure a first edition because they're expensive, George William Russell's books are available as reprints, and you can get them cheaper. So I think you would like. Who's POE? POE Pi Po? Oh no, we're not going there, are we? No, not yet. Allow me to. I have to share this with you. We have to read a little bit of Moriarty, another man. In the opening of Return to Segish, which has gone to print, it's supposed to be going on to the printing presses today. I dedicate the book to two remarkable human beings, C.G. Young and John Moriarty, who greatly inspired it. So I want to read a little bit of Moriarty's Invoking Ireland, Alio Eith na Hérand, the late great John Moriarty, who was a brilliant Edgar Allan. I was in his house in Philadelphia. Edgar Allan. I don't actually have any Poe. I don't. I used to when I was a kid, but I don't have any more. I just found it too dark. You know, I was a little bit sort of spooked out by it. You know. Brilliant. Sure, look. If we read a little short chapter of Moriarty's Invoking Ireland called Tolkien Revisited, we will also read Amergin's, the Song of Amergin in Irish and in English. So brilliant. We will, as it were, we won't be killing anything. We will be scoring 2 baskets with the 1 ball. Is that a simile that we could use? Raymonda Lind, thank you very much. I'm blushing. Glad you enjoyed that. But some of AE's work it's otherworldly. It's otherworldly, you know. It really is. Tolkien Revisited, and this is from Invoking Ireland by John Moriarty. We're nearly an hour and a half in, which means we're nearly halfway through already. Can you believe it? I kind of feel like we've only got started. Anyway, there you go. Amergin Glungyal, or Amergin as we call him, their shape-shifting poet, standing as stag, as hawk, as boar, as spear in the prow. It was in what looked like a fleet of initiations, not ships, that the Celts sailed up Kenmare Bay into Ireland. Of course, in Lower Gowalla we find out that their second landing, and the most important point of their landing, was at Inverculpa in the Boyne Estuary. Setting his right foot on land, Amergin sang, Am gwe imwur, am tun trahan, am form mara, am dam shechten ren, am sheg in isle, am jer grainje, am coin, am tork gael, am he I lind, am loch I mag, am bri dane, am gay in fov ferris fechtu, am j delvas dochind codnu. Coich nod glech clohor sleve, kia on kodagar eza eski. Apologies, it is difficult because it's early Irish. Kia du ilig funnage corenia, kia beer boar o he chawrak. Kia boar tetrak, chivje. Kia dain, kia j delvas fevru. And in I'lsiu concha in gai concha goiha. And in English, I am a wind in the sea. I am a sea wave upon the land. I am the roar of the ocean. I am a stag of 7 fights. I am a hawk on a cliff. I am a teardrop of the sun. I am fair. I am a boar for valour. I am a salmon in a pool. I am a lake in a plain. I am the excellence of arts. I am a spear waging war with plunder. I am God. I am a god who forms subjects for a ruler. Who can explain the stone designs of the mountain? Who invokes the ages of the moon? Where lies the setting of the sun? Who droves the cattle from the stalls of Tethra? The jocund cattle of Tethra, who or what are they? What man, what god forges the sun spear, forges the sword of light? Then indeed I invoked a satirist of wind. Still liminal to sea and land, and neither this nor that between hawk and human, he sings, his intention to name things in their plentifulness, to show himself willing to flourish with the flourishing world. Iescach muir mochach tír, tomaim neishk, ishke aund, fotind ein, or ein, lehach mil, portag lag, tomaim neishk, iskach muir. Fish abounding sea, fruitful land, eruption of fish, fishing there, bird under wave, great sea dragon, crab burrow, eruption of fish, fish abounding sea. Liminality lived. The Celts flourished inward into Ireland. High on Slievemish mountain they met the goddess of Irish sovereignty, she presenting herself as Banva. What you are doing is not to my liking, she said. But if it must be, then I ask that you will call the land by my name. I ask that you will call it Banva. Aurigin agreed, and he and his people moved on. Further inland on Cnoc Áine, there she was again, the goddess of Irish sovereignty, appearing to them this time as Fola. What you are doing is not to my liking, she said, but if it must be, then I ask that you will call the land by my name. I ask that you call it Fola. Aurigin agreed, and he and his people moved on. On the hill of Ishnach, at the heart of the country, it was as Éire that the goddess of Irish sovereignty showed herself to them. According to her request, Aurigin said, yes, we will call the land by your name. We will call it Éire. Continuing, the Celts came to Tara, and waiting for them were the three kings, Macul, the king of the dimension of Ireland, called Banva, Macecht, the king of the dimension of Ireland, called Fola, and Magraine, the king of the dimension of Ireland, called Éire. Had we known you were coming, Macul said, we'd have gone south to challenge you. Seeing justice in their case, Aurigin decided that he and his people would return to their ships and, boarding them, would bring them round and go back out over 9 waves. Out over 9 waves, in each wave an awakening to wonder, they sailed, and then the storm struck, scattering the ships. Suspecting that it was a magically conjured storm, Aurigin asked a boy to climb the mast, and yes, it wasn't blowing above the sails. So this was it, the resident people, if people they were, fighting not for the first time for their world. A wonder worker himself, Aurigin took them on. Sure of the calling, conjuring power of his words, he invoked the land of Ireland. Alio ieth na herend. Hermach muir, mohach sliev. Srachach kail. Kihach auv. Esach loch. I invoke the land of Ireland. Shining sea. Fertile mountain. Flourishing wood. Plentiful river. Fish rich lake. It worked. Ireland and everything in it, all its mountains, animals, woods, rivers and lakes, came over onto his side. Also, as though the magic power that sustained it had suddenly failed, the storm ceased. The dispersed ships, if that is what they were, reconvened as a fleet off the mouth of the Boyne. Wind and tide favouring, the Celts made landfall a long ways upriver. Next day at Talchu, victory was with them. Sadly, ever afterwards for Ireland, all that was divine in the land retreated to the grave mounds and to the lonely places. And that is Invoking Ireland by John Moriarty, asking Irish people to reconnect with their deepest springs. Moriarty reads the tales in the light of a modern depth psychology of which most Celtic scholars are still quite innocent. His commentaries are like the unleashing of lost ancestral forces, flashing forth again in our moment of current danger. These visionary texts are a reminder of the life force that beats within us all. And that's from a blurb, a review of this wonderful book by Declan Kybert. So there you go. Okay, on to the next thing. Yeah, just checking that I'm not missing any important requests or anything on the comments. Brilliant. Okay. What else? Oh, there has to be something sort of incredible, something else that's been incredibly inspiring. There's loads and loads of bits and pieces. Let me just see for a moment. Yeah, I could probably read a page of. Let me just find something first. I'll know which are my favorite sections by the ones that have the greatest number of margin markings. So I'm going to read a little bit of our friend, the late great Patricia Monaghan, and this is from her book, The Red-Haired Girl from the Bog, The Landscape of Celtic Myth and Spirit. How about a little something about the other ones? And somebody's saying Yeats. Yes, I certainly have. I have a complete Yeats here somewhere, like everything he's ever written in one book. I could do that. The other ones, yeah, well, I could read from Eddie, couldn't I? I could read one of Eddie's short stories. Yes, I could do that. Let me just read a page of Patricia Monaghan first. Lunasa marked the beginning of a season that extended to Samhain on November the 1st, a season ruled by the Cailleach, who, in bygone days, was omnipresent across Ireland. A tied sheaf called the Cailleach stood at the centre of each field, toward which harvesters cut the grain. Small animals, frogs, corncrakes, partridges, and especially hares, the hag's animal, fled before flails and scythes into that central sheaf. When the field was nearly mown, the workers set up a din, shouting and clanging tools together to, quote, put the hair out of the corn, unquote, as folklorist Kevin Danaher attests. Frightened away from the Cailleach, the animals scurried to an unharvested field. Thus the harvesters drove the hag's animals before them as they cut down again and again the old one herself. Because the last stalk cut in a region was an especially potent reservoir of hag power, great care was taken with the ceremony. Depending upon the region, lots were drawn, or blindfolded women took up sides, or the youngest worker was assigned the deed. This final cutting of the Cailleach was a moment of great power and equivalent danger. Her freed energy brought healing, but where the rite botched, a bitter winter resulted. Once cut, the Cailleach sheaf was treated reverently, dressed as an old woman or plaited into a cross. It hung in house or barn until replaced by the next year's sheaf. In many areas, the Cailleach sheaf provided material for spring's Bridget crosses. The same hag into virgin motif we encountered in our tale of Niall visiting the well. That's the famous story of Niall kissing the hag who turns into a young woman. Here we peer into the deep heart of the Cailleach, for her power derives from this ability to re-virgin herself. Some writers, like Barbara Walker, who identifies her with Hindu Kali, proclaim the Cailleach ruler of death, offering her connection with harvest as incontrovertible proof. But plants die in that season, not humans. The US Department of Vital Statistics reports that even today, more people die as spring approaches than they do in autumn. Before food became plentiful year-round, this pattern was stronger. Even in lean years, there was more food after harvest than before. Once the cows were driven in, bullied, from bow, the Irish for cow, from the hills and the hay saved, communities enjoyed a period of full-bellied leisure. The Cailleach season was a time not of privation, but of abundance. That's a fabulous book, by the way. Fabulous book. The Dawning of the Day. Yes, let me just think about this now for Lake Isle of Innisfree. Okay. Let me find my where did I get Patricia? Let me find my my complete Yeats. Yeats. Yes. Now, because it's so long, there you go. It's marked in pencil already, so I can find it. Page 60. There's a recording of Yeats reading this, and it's so funny because you kind of you know when you've seen a face in pictures for years and years, and you expect them to sound a particular way. You invent a voice in your head to match that face. And then you hear them speaking and you're totally taken aback, you know. Interestingly, by the way, who else? Tolkien, who we read at the beginning, you know, there's some recordings of him reading, you know, and it's just not perhaps just quite what you expect. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavements grey, I hear it in the deep heart's core. There you go. So for some reason, I'm not seeing anything on the chat except for the YouTube comments. I seem to be missing all the Facebook ones. Kathy May Deo is in the house on Facebook. That's frustrating because I don't seem to be able to do anything about that midstream. You know, I can't correct that. It's all YouTube comments that I'm seeing in front of me. Anyway, one more. Sure, look, I've done it before, I think, but sure. I don't have to read it because I know it by heart, but I'll find it anyway. That would be the Song of Wandering Angus. How are we all doing? Are we all comfortable? Has everybody got a cuppa or something? I'm going to take a wee sip of the water. That's what I'm going to do. The throat is a tiny bit dry at this point in time. So long as, Rowan Grove, there are not a lot of comments, but there are absolutely none appearing on my streaming service. So that's a little bit annoying, one could say. But anyway, we'll do our best to keep up with everything. What did I say? Song of Wandering Angus. Why do I need to have the page open? Just in case I miss a beat and get it wrong. I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone and kiss her lips and take her hands, and walk among long dappled grass and pluck till time and times are done. The silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. And that is flawlessly, thankfully, the Song of Wandering Aengus, written by Yeats in 1897, curiously the same year as George William Russell wrote the Dream of Aengus Og. Okay, I'm kind of have to feed the pups around 4 something. That's okay. There's absolutely no worries whatsoever if anybody needs to take a break or whatever. I feel the need to read something by or about Jung. I'm feeling, but I'm not quite sure what. First, though, a story from Eddie Lenihan's book. We had, as our first guest on Live Irish Myths in Conversation, we had the wonderful Eddie Lenihan a number of weeks ago, and he was brilliant, fabulously entertaining. Let me find something just briefly. Let's flick. A midnight ride. I went over to my uncle in Fecal one time, and we went on Courage one night. That's night visiting. And we were coming home about 12 o'clock in the night, and this terrible noise came along the road of horses galloping. And my uncle was coming behind me, and he says, "Will you come for a drive tonight?" By the way, this is from the book, just in case you didn't see it, was Meeting the Other Crowd, the Fairy Stories of Hidden Ireland, collected by Eddie Lenihan, with Carolyn Eve Green. "Where?" I said, "or what?" "Oh, we haven't much time now," he says. "First horse that'll pass you, shout, a cap and a horse for me." Faith, no length till the horses came, and I heard my uncle shouting behind me, "A cap and a horse for me." And I shouted the same. The next thing, we were gone. No idea in God's glory where we went, but we were travelling for a long time. We could be gone back as far as Lochray. We had terrible jumps here and there. You'd hear an old man shouting now and again to hold the reins tight. We could be back around Lochray or Ballinasloe, but all of a sudden it stopped. And you could look round, see nothing. You didn't know in the hell what was up, but there was terrible sound o' people now and again. Great commotion o' talk. Every now and again, a light would flash over and hither, and it seems a football match was on. Whether 'twas Cork or Galway, or who was at it between the fairies, this huge crowd was inside in a field by the side of a grove. Some of them was dressed in white and more in green, but the light had flashed now and again, just to let you see 'twas on. And the terrible shouting was going on inside, every now and again. I have no idea how I was able to stick it out, but after about an hour and a half we started again with our horses. An old man came and shouted. They must have won the match. There was terrible shouting started. But he came along. I suppose we had to cross the Shannon. He let one unmerciful shout. "Boys," he said, "stick tight. This is a big jump." And we landed, I suppose, in Tipperary or someplace, in across the Shannon, and off we went. We was going all night long, until we landed back again where we were, and felt these things coming down to the ground. And down we was, the very same as when we were picked up, at 6 o'clock in the morning. Wasn't that something? Wasn't that an experience? And my uncle says to me, if they ask you where you was, he said, say we were playing cards. Don't let on we were out driving. So I never told anyone for years where we was that night. Not very often does one hear of a person brave or mad enough to invite himself into the fairy host on its travels, but here we have such an account. The older man obviously has gone on such outings previously, for he knows the magic formula that will allow them to obtain transport for the night's adventure. The younger man, however, finds the night frightening, confusing, yet exhilarating. And this is an explanation of the story, obviously. A kaleidoscope of sounds, movements, colours, and impossible feats like jumping the Shannon, the largest river in Ireland. No wonder his uncle tells him to mention nothing about it when about where they've been all night when they get home. Here again we see the competitiveness of the fairies in their games and the long distances they travel on important occasions to meet rival teams and support their own, just like the followers of hurling and Gaelic football. Excuse me, to this very day, in fact. Meeting the Other Crowd by Eddie Lennon. I have a request from Robin Edgar. There you go. Okie doke. Robin would like to hear me talk about synchronicity and young, particularly from Jung. One of the difficulties with Jung is he's a very scientific writer, so his prose is not so easy. Robin Edgar says, let me just bring this across to this screen so I can see it here in front of me. You could read what Carl Jung had to say about synchronicity, or you could just read the lyrics to the Police songs about synchronicity. I'd actually like to hear you read the lyrics of synchronicity in your lilting Irish accent. Here they are. With one breath, with one flow, you will know synchronicity. A sleep trance, a dream dance, a shared romance, synchronicity. A connecting principle. I apologize. That's embarrassing. It has disappeared off my screen. Bear with me one moment, Robin, while I try to reclaim it. That is interesting. Where is Robin's comment gone? Sorry, I do apologize. That is very embarrassing. Totally interrupted my flow there now. This is live TV. That's what happens. These are the things that happen. They happen to the very best of us. I can't find it now. That's really, really strange. It was there and it just literally vanished. Robin, I do apologize. It has disappeared on me. I cannot continue. And there's absolutely no way I'm singing. Hang on now. Let's just go. Let's synchronicity, that police. Google it. The lyrics. I want the lyrics. Let's have a look. Sorry, I should have put lyrics in the search. I apologize for this. Slight delay to the broadcast. Synchronicity 1, I presume it is. Yes. Sorry about that. Oh, I'll try again. With one breath, with one flow, you will know synchronicity. A sleep trance, a dream dance, a shared romance, synchronicity. A connecting principle linked to the invisible, almost imperceptible, something inexpressible. Science insusceptible, logic so inflexible. Causally connectable, yet nothing is invincible. If we share this nightmare, then we can dream spiritus mundi. If you act as you think, the missing link, synchronicity. We know you, they know me, extrasensory synchronicity. A connecting principle linked to the invisible, almost imperceptible. something inexpressible, science insusceptible, logic so inflexible, causally connectable, yet nothing is invincible. We know you, they know me. Extrasensory synchronicity. A star fall, a phone call, it joins all. Synchronicity, etc., etc., etc. Wow, I'm sure I know that song, but not when I'm speaking it. Rather, I think it would be better. I do apologise. I have to apologise for the momentary interruption. It seems that the yes, the F words are at play tonight. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think we will do any more F word reading, if that's okay. Apologies. I hope I'm back. I know I'm back on YouTube because I can see it. I hope I'm also back on Facebook and that it hasn't been lost. It would be just my luck if that were the case. Yeah, I'm back. No, that's okay. So, okay, let me just check that there weren't any requests that I missed. Wash hands, elbow cough. Yes, indeed. We did Joseph Campbell. Mariana Dunn. Yes, I did read a bit of Campbell, the introduction or the first part from A Hero with 1,000 Faces at the very early on in the live stream. Yes, I am actually sanitizing my hands as I speak. I hope I'm back everywhere. Anyway, that was apology. So that I meant to move a tab from this screen to that one, and I closed it instead of moving it, and it was the tab that I was broadcasting from. So I've just demonstrated that you can close it and go back into it. Probably the one who sort of I felt the one person who sort of wrote the best about Jung was Lawrence van der Post. He has a beautiful biography, a wonderful biography of Jung called Jung and the Story of Our Time. Let me just see if I can find a quick section of that to read. Oh, how are we doing for time? Oh, it's telling me I've been on for less than 3 minutes. So we're nearly at 9 p.m. So we've another hour. So that's 2/3 of the way. If you've lasted this long, fair play to you. That's all I can say. Congratulations on not being bored into somnambulity or somnambulism. Yeah, let's just read a brief bit of van der Post talking about C.G. Jung. I say this. What does he say? Let's go back a sentence. It is our only certain intimation that something in him already knew that the vision too was a continuation of the dreaming process, possibly even more imperative than the dream itself. I say this because it seems that there was an important difference between the two processes. The dream, I believe, is part of the unconscious made accessible to our waking selves in sleep, a potential form, as it were, of conscious unconsciousness. The vision is an illumination from the unconscious, so charged and powerful that it breaks with startling clarity through the watchful barriers of our awakened mind to become a dream experience in a fully conscious state. Somehow, Jung knew this, or rather, he allowed it to know more for him than his upbringing allowed him to know for himself. So both vision and dream could, with extraordinary accuracy, combine to keep his imagination in its natural way against the trend of the entire age. Not surprisingly, with no conscious precedent to guide him, there was a stage when the sense of direction into which his imagination was being impelled was taken literally. This is why he had believed that his most ardent wish at Baal was to become an archaeologist. It was years before he realized that the latent meaning of this urge was archaeology of a sort, but not in the physical world. It was archaeology of the mind, aimed at uncovering, amid the ruins of the modern spirit, the foundations, plural, of the authentic city of the soul. Isn't that lovely prose? This had once stood foursquare and complete against chaos and old night before the coming of the word in the beginning and that trumpet moment when the first spirit delivered itself, saying, "Let there be light," and there was light. One is humbled by the protective power of the inborn intuitions which joined dream and vision to keep Jung on course, despite the ridicule and disapproval heaped on him. He was enabled to maintain his interest in all sorts of phenomena beyond the pale of respectable knowledge and investigation. I was, he told me at one of our earliest meetings, often amazed to the point of despair at the presumption of the organized knowledge and discipline of my day, and their common attitude of all-knowingness, which I encountered everywhere among men in command of religions and scientific and philosophic heights. I was enraged by their lack of ordinary, natural, healthy curiosity in what they did not know, and also by their instant dismissal as irrelevant of what seemed to me to be pointers towards increased knowledge and new areas for investigation. I was prompted to tell him how moved I had always been by the bushmen of my native country, because they gave out the feeling of belonging to life and time and nature. They had no doubt of being known in full wherever they went, whereas in this world and this war from which I had just come, I had a feeling that for all our pose of all-knowing, we ourselves had utterly lost this feeling of being known. Jung slapped his great hand on my knee and said, "That is precisely what I felt as a student. I started out in life with the feeling of utterly belonging. I had a most wonderful sense of participation in the beauty and wonder of my surroundings. Then I found myself pushed by the life of my time in a direction where the feeling seemed to vanish over the horizon and be permanently lost. And I knew that somehow, however necessary that separation might be, it must not be allowed to last. If this sense of separation was to have any meaning, I had to live life in such a way that one day I was reunited with the sense of that all belonging that I had had in the beginning. Even more remarkable for me than the intuition which led Jung so unerringly in the direction of this other archaeology was his knowledge that it could not be done by intuition alone. Already in his first years as a medical student at Basel, he was reprimanding himself. I must stop talking to others out of my intuition. I must talk more out of facts. Somehow, somewhere, I must find the facts to match my intuition. I love that. I think that's brilliant. Jung and the Story of Our Time by Lorenz van der Post. There is another wonderful biography, which is similarly titled by Marie von Franz, which is a brilliant, wonderful biography, and it was the first book I've ever read about Jung. But I just find that van der Post's prose is just it's got a gorgeousness about it. He just writes fabulously, you know. Okay, so I'm still open to requests. I'll read a bit of Ledwidge while you're deciding what you want. In fact, I don't have to read it. I can recite my favourite poem of Francis Ledwidge. Francis Ledwidge. We kind of know him in the Boyne Valley as the war poet of Slane, which is a bit unfair because I mean he was killed in the Great War in 1918 at Ypres, or yes, and what I find fascinating about his poem is called, the poem that I like the best is called "The Dead Kings." And what I find fascinating about it is, first of all, I've written about this in my book, in my Mythical Ireland book, is that he appears to relate to folklore of the Boyne Valley, particularly relating to Rosnaree. And he also appears to have a vision of his own death in this poem, which I think is sad, but also fascinating. Let me just... is everybody okay? Let me just check. I'm seeing all the... Okay, just check on the Facebook. Oh, having to put money into the TV. There was... pardon me. There was not too long ago, we actually had to put money into the electricity box at the front of the house in homes to keep the, the electricity would occasionally go off and somebody would say, somebody has to put money into the box. So this is called The Dead Kings. I don't have to read it because I know it by heart, and I think I might have read it before. The Selfish Giant by Wilde. Is that long, Marie, or... I'm trying to keep the sort of readings short so that, first of all, that we can incorporate as much as possible, but secondly, that we don't breach copyright. I'll check it because I have the complete Wilde here as well. All the dead kings came to me at Rosnaree, where I was dreaming. A few stars glimmered through the morn, and down the thorn the dews were streaming. And every dead king had a story of ancient glory sweetly told. It was too early for the lark, but the starry dark had tints of gold. I listened to the sorrows three. I apologise, I shouldn't have to do that. Of that era passed into song. A cock crowed near a hazel croft, and up aloft dim larks winged strong. And I too told the kings a story of later glory, her fourth sorrow. There was a sound like moving shields in high green fields on the lonely furrow. And one said, we who yet are kings have heard these things lamenting inly. Sweet music flowed from many a bill, and on the hill the morn stood queenly. And one said, over is the singing, and bell bough ringing whence we come. With heavy hearts we'll tread the shadows. In honey meadows birds are dumb. And one said, since the poets perished, and all they cherished in the way, their thoughts unsung like petal showers inflame the hours of blue and grey. And one said, a loud tramp of men we'll hear again at Rosnaree. A bomb burst near me where I lay. I woke, 'twas day in Picardy. And in fact, that's exactly how poor Francis Ledwidge met his end at the tender age of 29. He might have been 30, I think he was 29. A bomb exploded right beside him. And in the description of the priest who wrote to his mother to inform her of his death, he said that poor Ledwidge had been blown to bits. So there you go. What were we saying? The Selfish Giant. Is that? I'm just going to check if that's long. We can read a bit of it, of course. Excuse me. Where is my complete Wild. Do-do-do-do-do. Planning to take a walk on the wild side. Where is wild? Where are you, Oscar? Come down to me from lofty yonder shelf. Here we go. I apologise. By the way, the amulet, the jewel, is a beautiful swan spiral design by our wonderful friend Tom King. Ongoa, the smith of Slane, who regularly watches all of these. There you go. Let me have a look. What did we say? Selfish Giant. Let me just have a quick look here. Selfish Giant. Oh, it's 4 pages, so maybe we'll be able to read that. Maybe we'll be able to read the whole lot. Let me have a look. Thank you for suggesting something short, Helen. Thank you. Was it Helen? Sorry, I apologize. Marie, I apologize. Thank you, Marie. Early afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are here," they cried to each other. One day the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. After the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had to say, for his conversation was limited, and he determined to return to his own castle when he arrived and saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall around it and put up a notice board. "Trespassers will be prosecuted." He was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander around the high walls when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. "Spring has forgotten this garden," they cried, "so we will live here all year round." The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. "This is a delightful spot," he said. "We must ask the hail on a visit." So the hail came. Every day for 3 hours, he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates. And then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey, and his breath was like ice. "I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming," said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold, white garden. "I hope there will be a change in the weather." But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. "He is too selfish," she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he heard a bird song in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. "I believe the spring has come at last," said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see there was a child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms, and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene, only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked out. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever." He was really very sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his 2 arms and flung them round the giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring. "It is your garden now, little children," said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. "But where is your little companion?" he said, "the boy I put into the tree." The giant loved him the best because he had kissed him. "We don't know," answered the children. "He has gone away." "You must tell him to be sure and come tomorrow," said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before, and the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon, when school was over, the children came and played with the giant. But the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend and often spoke of him. "How I would like to see him," he used to say. Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about any more, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. "I have many beautiful flowers," he said, "but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all." One winter morning he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep, and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvellous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy and out into the garden. He hastened across the grass and came near to the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, and he said, "Who hath dared to wound thee?" For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on the little feet. "Who hath dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me, that I may take my big sword and slay him." "Nay," answered the child, "but these are the wounds of love." "Who art thou?" said the giant, and a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant dead, lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. Lovely. In a way. Also, yes, sad, but beautiful. Echoes of the Big Friendly Giant. Yes, indeed. That is the Collins Complete Works of Oscar Wilde, if anyone's interested. I think I picked that up in a second-hand bookshop for about £2. Brilliant. I love bargains. Right, where next? How are we doing? We're 40 minutes left. Well, we're doing pretty well. Well, I mean, you're doing pretty well because you're the ones who have to sit and listen. Just having a look here now, see if there's anything that sort of immediately jumps out in terms of. Excuse me while I yawn. Oh, I do apologise. Somebody requested something about Lou. We're back to Cross and Slover, I think. Let me just, or should I read Squire? I should probably read Squire, yes. Yes. Somebody said I should read Lou, the bit that we had done in the first episode of Live Irish Myths. So let me see if I can read just a little bit even about Lou. Yes. At the same time, we all right. Loving the variety. Swans of Lear. Yeah, that's Raymond de Lind. Yes, that is. You're absolutely right. That is a fantastic story. The Children of Lear. It is fabulous. For the purposes of our reading tonight, it is unfortunately far too long. Now, we did, if you're interested, we did do 2 or 3 episodes of Live Irish Myths about it. So it's there on the YouTube channel. If you would like to hear it in full. Absolutely. I'm going to read a little bit about Lou. At the same time, another assembly was also being held at Tara, the capital of the Tuatha De Danann. Nuada was celebrating his return to the throne with a feast for his people. While it was still at its height, a stranger clothed like a king came to the palace gate. Excuse me. The porter asked him his name and errand. "I am called Lou," he said. "I am the grandson of Dian Cecht by Cian, my father, and the grandson of Balor by Ethlin, my mother." "But what is your profession?" asked the porter, "for no one is admitted here unless he is a master of some craft." "I am a carpenter," said Lou. "We have no need of a carpenter. We already have a very good one. His name is Luchtene." "I am an excellent smith," said Lou. "We do not want a smith. We have a very good one. His name is Govnu." I am a professional warrior, said Lou. We have no need of one. Ogma is our champion. I am a harpist, said Lou. We have an excellent harpist already. I am a warrior renowned for skillfulness rather than for mere strength. We already have a man like that. I am a poet and tale teller, said Lou. We have no need of such. We have a most accomplished poet and tale teller. I am a sorcerer, said Lou. We do not want one. We have numberless sorcerers, and druids. I am a physician, said Lou. Dian Kecht is our physician. I am a cupbearer, said Lou. We already have 9 of them. I am a worker in bronze. We have no need of you. We already have a worker in bronze. His name is Crejne, which I think is the Irish for bronze, isn't it? And at this point, you're probably imagining a Monty Python scene, you know? Now, we got one of them already. We don't need... Go on, bugger off. Sorry. Then ask the king, said Lou, if he has with him a man who is master of all these crafts at once. For if he has, there is no need for me to come to Tara. So the doorkeeper went inside and told the king that a man had come who called himself Lou the Oldalnach, or the master of all arts, and that he claimed to know everything. The king sent out his best chess player to play against the stranger. Lou won, inventing a new move called Lou's Enclosure. Then Nuada invited him in. Lou entered and sat down on the chair called the Sage's Seat, kept for the wisest man. Ogma, the champion, was showing off his strength. Upon the floor was a flagstone so large that 70 yokes of oxen would have been needed to move it. Ogma pushed it before him along the hall and out at the door. Then Lou rose from his chair and pushed it back again. But this stone, huge as it was only a portion broken from a still greater rock outside the palace. Lou picked it up and put it back in its place. The Tuatha Dé Danann asked him to play the harp for them. So he played the sleep tune, and the king and all his court fell asleep and did not wake until the same hour of the following day. Next he played a plaintive air, and they all wept. Lastly, he played a measure that sent them into transports of joy. When Nuada had seen all these numerous talents of Lou, he began to wonder whether one so gifted would not be of great help against the Fomori. He took counsel with the others, and by their advice lent his throne to Lou for 13 days, taking the sage's seat at his side. Lou summoned all the Tuatha Dé Danann to a council. The Fomori are certainly going to make war on us, he said. What can each of you do to help? And then, basically, this is from Moitura, the Second Battle of Moitura. And Lou basically takes on the role of the king and marshals all of the other Tuatha Dé Danann into action for their looming battle with the Fomorians. And I won't spoil it. Cake or death, says Deborah Williams. Monty Python, lol, says Robin. Yes, indeed. Let me just check that I haven't missed any. Tom King is actually in the house. There you are, Tom. I didn't see you there. I'm not seeing the Facebook comments on the stream here, which is annoying, but it is. Nora Gaffney O'Connor is here as well. Seamus Marr is also here. Is there anything else anyone would like to request, or will I just pick out a few more bits and pieces? Yes, that is Charles Squire. Oh, we've had a very good variety tonight. It's been delightful. Let me just quickly check if there's something that's kind of just really wants to be read. Sure, look, we couldn't do an episode. We couldn't. Well, I really don't think we could possibly do a 3-hour reading without introducing a small amount of. Oh, Raymond de Lind, something from one of your books. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit from Return to Segish before we finish. That's my new book, which is on the printing press as we speak. I should absolutely, definitely prompt you that that is available to pre-order on the Mythical Ireland website right now. So we'll just read a little bit from Mircea Eliade, and that is from probably his most famous work, his best known work, The Myth of the Eternal Return, Cosmos and History. I'll just grab a section of it and read. That, for a primitive, the regeneration of time is continually effected, that is, within the interval of the year, too, is proven by the antiquity and universality of certain beliefs in respect to the moon. By the way, you might have seen my picture on the Facebook pages earlier on of a 97% illuminated moon, very close to the full moon at this stage. The moon is the first of the creatures to die, but also the first to live again. We have elsewhere shown the importance of lunar myths in the organization of the first coherent theories concerning death and resurrection, fertility and regeneration, initiation, and so on. Here it will suffice to recall that if the moon in fact serves to measure time, if the moon's phases long before the solar year and far more concretely reveal a unit of time, the month, the moon at the same time reveals the eternal return. The phases of the moon, appearance, increase, wane, disappearance, followed by reappearance after 3 nights of darkness, have played an immense part in the elaboration of cyclical concepts. We find analogous concepts, especially in the archaic apocalypses and anthropogonies. I don't know how to pronounce that. These would be the cosmogonies of humans, the cycles of humanity, or the cycles of humankind. Anthropogonies or anthropogonies. I don't know how to pronounce it. There you go. Deluge or flood puts an end to an exhausted and sinful humanity for the first time in 2.5 hours. Anthony finds a word that he can't pronounce. Deluge or flood puts an end to an exhausted and sinful humanity, and a new regenerated humanity is born, usually from a mythical ancestor who escaped the catastrophe, or from a lunar animal. A stratigraphic analysis of these groups of myths brings out their lunar calendar. Nearly slipped on that one too. He's like Eliade. He's just going, here's a couple of banana skins for Murphy to skid on. This means that the lunar rhythm not only reveals short intervals, like week and month, but also serves as the archetype for extended durations. In fact, the birth of a humanity, its growth, decrepitude, wear, and disappearance are assimilated into the lunar cycle. And this assimilation is important not only because it shows us the lunar structure of universal becoming, but also because of its optimistic consequences. For, just as the disappearance of the moon is never final, since it is necessarily followed by a new moon, the disappearance of man is not final either. In particular, even the disappearance of an entire humanity, deluge, flood, submersion of a continent, and so on, is never total. For a new humanity is born from a pair of survivors. That is from the wonderful work of, and there's 3 or 4 more Eliade books up there, but we do not have the time. It is like being at a literary buffet, says Burr Whelan. Take your pick, lol. Yes, indeed. But I'm still taking requests. I only take requests when I'm asked. Somebody wants to hear something. Oh, yes. I shouldn't, but I will. Give you a little insight. Perhaps I might encourage you all to consider pre-ordering your copy of Return to Segish, which is on the printing presses. I was told was going on the printing presses today. All going well. I should have copies in my hands by spring equinox, 20th of March, or a little bit earlier, even better again. So if that is your desire, and you're thinking along the lines of, that sounds like a book I might be interested in. The book is $21.99, but the price on the website includes, of course, postage and packaging. I'm just pasting in the link beneath all the live streams here as a comment, if you so wish to have a look at perhaps. Now let me just find, I'm only reading a very, very short amount from this because I just, because it hasn't been released to the public yet. So this is a bit of an exclusive, as it were. Yeah, something about that really sort of rang bells or struck me as being perhaps and this is from a chapter of Return to Segish called the Eternal Man, and this sort of portion of the book deals with Ishnach and Ishnach and Ishnach, of course, as we saw from Moriarty's Invoking Ireland, has a hugely important role in the mythology and sort of cosmology of Ireland. And so this is a section about being under Isle na Muireann, which is the stone of divisions, the navel stone, the omphalos, umbilicus hiberniae, the navel of Ireland. In the darkness behind his closed eyelids, he found that his eyes were very much open, and suddenly all the things he had seen in his expeditions seemed like such trifling and inconsequential occurrences. At what point, he felt he was being asked, had he said or done something that had merged the worlds? Merging the worlds, he had thrown the boulders of his guilt away. He tossed the boulders of his transgressions. Fionn-like, he had removed his burdens to the far shores of Ireland. He threw his boulder burdens east and south and west and north, far from Ishnach and far from Tara and far from Gullion. Cuchulainn-like, he grabbed the great Tathlum and threw it around the sky. The many places of its landing would mark the graves of his regrets. Dying there, under the setting moon in the soil of Ireland, his regrets would pass into another world, a world beyond judgment. Free from the Tathlum of his regrets, he could balance the giant navel stone on the tip of his little finger, if he so wished. On the earth, merged with the sacred soil of Ishnach, he laughed as the weight of Isle na Muireann diminished to that of a grain of sand. Behind the closed eyelids of his very open eyes, he beheld a great navel. There was an opening like a portal of spirit and light, circular but narrow. As it dilated, there emerged a giant stone globe. Rings of light flashed and pulsated, emanating from the navel. A new world was being born. A new world in which the dim light of Andromeda reached to the bottom of Segish was coming into being. A new world was being born in which the old mythic giants were the night beauties of someone's love dream. Fionn walked there in the light of the world being born. Amergin walked there in the light of the world being born. Anya walked there. Bridget walked there. Ogma walked there, and Nechtan walked there. In the night dream at Omphalos, the Tuatha Dé Danann rejoiced in their decision to burn their ships at Conmacnarain. There would be no need for ships, no need for escape, no need for retribution, no need for absolution. Eru had called them back to the heart of themselves. Like a bird in a tree, she watched them, and her morning song was a sweet calling, a lulling to a deeper place. Under Isle na Muireann, the pilgrim shook. There was a great vibration, as if the earth quivered at the burning of the ships. The pilgrim lost his grey and dusky pallor, and instead he became like an amber sun, shining a bright dawn into the long night of his many journeys. Eru heaved and breathed beneath him, and they smiled. Conmacnarain became a mountain of declaration, of determination. Burning their ships at Connemara, the Tuatha Dé Danann knew they only needed to come to Uisneach to find their centre. Coming to their centre at Uisneach, they would never leave Ireland. Isle na Muireann is where their sky nature merged with their earth nature. The fusing of their natures at the navel of Eru was a calling to the world. And that is a short reading from the forthcoming Return to Segish, my 7th book and my first book in hardback. So if you want, if you so wish, you can order a copy from the website. Alan Watts. Ooh, Wattsy! Yes. I do have at least one. I do, I think. Let me just... come on. Watts. Alan. Where are you, Alan? Speak to me. Oh, that's not good. I can't see him. Young. Iliadi. Alan Watts. Seeds of Genius, the early writings. Yes. I'm not so familiar with his writing, but there's so much Alan Watts material on YouTube. I have sat and listened enthralled on many an occasion to Alan Watts and his lectures, which are available on YouTube. And it's just such a pleasure to listen to, you know. Well, that is great advert to come and live in Ireland, if ever I heard one. Beautiful narrative. I look forward to the book when I have some spare NZ dollars. That's brilliant. Ray Mondelin, thank you very much. Glad that you enjoyed what you heard. How are we doing? Oh, we're not too far from the finish. Do I have to go over the 3 hours because of the little breaks? It is often, sorry, the word often is not there. This is Alan Watts' Seeds of Genius, the early writings. It has been said that to unite, one must first separate. That's fascinating. That is very much a theme of Return to Segish. And so there's a synchronicity, Robin Edgar, if ever I saw one. These synchronicities happen in small and big measure every day. And whatever the faults of humanism as an ideal, it has this virtue as a means, that as a separation of man from nature, it must necessarily precede his return to nature. It must not be imagined, however, that this has anything to do with what is usually understood as the back to nature movement. It is no more a matter of returning to the condition from which we started than the prodigal son returning to his former relationship with his father. On the contrary, he returned to a very much more intimate and conscious relationship. So much so that it was for him, and not for the son who had always stayed at home, that the fatted calf was killed. Thus, man as the primitive, as the savage, is like the son who has never left his home. He is so closely in touch with nature that the distinction between natural and artificial does not arise for him, and yet, if we may alter the words of Kipling, we must say of him, he does not know nature who only nature knows. Indeed, so close is his union with nature in and around himself that he attributes personality to wind, rocks, and trees, and is almost unable to distinguish between dreams and waking life. In his own moods and impulses, he sees the outward and visible signs of gods and demons, and the whole animate and inanimate universe is one with him in the kinship of personality. But he has not the civilized man's sense of personal identity. He has not one soul, but many. He has not the same sense of personal responsibility, for to him all his emotions, feelings, and obsessions are distinct beings dwelling in his own body. But with the development of consciousness and the sense of identity, man becomes estranged from nature. He becomes self-conscious and uses the word I instead of referring to himself in the third person. For just as the child says, Peter wants it, the savage says, Mbongo, faithful servant, because neither can distinguish clearly between subject and object, between themselves and the external world. But when he becomes self-conscious, man rejects the idea that his moods and impulses are distinct beings of unpredictable behaviour, and accepts some responsibility for them. He finds that through reason they can, to some extent, be controlled, and that the natural forces of the external world can also be made to submit in some measure to his conscious will. Hence, there follows the struggle for mastery between man and nature, and as man feels himself more and more a distinct and isolated being, so the struggle increases. In this way, the philosophy of humanism is evolved, for man places his trust in the growing power of his own reason as against the irrational forces of nature. He glorifies himself by the measure of his separateness from and his rulership over the non-human world. To persist in this attitude, however, involves, as we have seen, a number of unfortunate consequences. For carried to its extreme, isolation is the equivalent of lunacy, and every mental specialist knows that the lunatic is the most isolated person on earth. The part only has meaning in some constructive and harmonious relationship with the whole, and no one would think much of the steering wheel of a car if it suddenly decided to step outside and inspect the front tires. Nor would it be considered especially useful if it was so far unable to preserve its identity as to become involved with the gearbox. For in all things there is a middle way, which means simply a sense of proportion and relationship. Hence, the separation of man from nature called humanism is in fact a preparation for a more intimate and fruitful union, a matter of reculer pour mieux sauter, a standing away from the trees in order to obtain a view of the wood. In childhood, there is no fruitful distinction between male and female, therefore, children do not produce children. Thus, before man can bear fruit, he must become fully aware of the division between the two sexes. In adolescence, this division is the cause of estrangement. The boy is somewhat contemptuous of the girl, but he no longer plays with her as in childhood, but seeks companions of his own sex. Yet later on, this estrangement gives way to the new union of marriage, and a child is born. There is this difference, however, between the union of marriage and the union of childhood, that in the latter, the distinction between male and female has no meaning and is therefore not recognized, whereas in the former, the distinction is not only recognized, but also has meaning. And the meaning is the child, for the child is the raison d'être of the otherwise absurd division. Thus, there are three stages. The first, where there is no distinction. The second, where there is distinction but conflict. And the third, where there is distinction and harmony, and, as a result of harmony, meaning. Can you read the Morrigan's prophecy? I don't have any of Michael Sarion's books. I don't. Is the quick answer, Oak, to your question. So I do apologise. Joan McHugh wants me to read the Morrigan's Prophecy. I wonder if we should read that from Morgan Daimler's translation of Caught My Chura. Do you think, or will we take the scholarly? Sure. I think we'll take Morgan's. Morgan Daimler's recently published full English translation of Caught My Chura, Second Battle of My Chura, and that's available. I think it's available on Amazon, but a quick Google search will reveal where it's available. So bear with me one moment, Joan. Thank you for your request. Thank you, Miriam Kilmurray. I'm glad you enjoyed that reading of Return to Segish, and perhaps you and I will be able to have a conversation. I think, yeah, if you enjoyed that, that is just a tiny taster of it. Okay, that's Alan Watts. Alan Watts is one of those, as I said, one of those people who, you know, you could just have his voice in your head for hours. You could put the headphones on when you're going to bed and just listen to Alan Watts for hours. He's just wonderful. A bit like Joseph Campbell, you know. I mean, the funny thing about Jung is, and Jung was brilliant, don't get me wrong, he was a fabulous writer and fabulous investigator of the human psyche, but his voice wouldn't be one that I would want to listen to for hours, you know. There are some people whose voices, when you hear them, are just fabulous. And as I said, when I heard W.B. Yeats reading The Lake Isle of Innisfree, I was like, no, I wouldn't want him reading his poetry to me. I'd prefer perhaps someone like Ian McKellen, for instance, reading poetry to me. Sean Connery, the late Sean Connery, would be, I think, brilliant to have reading in your ear as you're going to sleep, you know. Once the battle was broken afterwards and the slaughter start that again, Anthony, and try and punctuate it properly this time, you fool. Once the battle was broken afterwards and the slaughter cleaned away, the Morrigan, daughter of Ernmas, there announced the deadly tidings of the battle and the great victory that had occurred there to the kings of Ireland and to the she-folk and to the chief waters and to the river mouths. This is why Bow still declares great deeds. What news with you? Everyone asked her then. Peace to sky, sky to earth, earth below sky, strength in each one. A cup overfull, filled with honey, sufficiency of renown, summer in winter, spears supported by warriors, warriors supported by forts. Forts fiercely strong, banished our sad outcries, land of sheep, healthy under antler points, destructive battle cries held back. Crops or masts on trees, a branch resting with produce, sufficiency of sons, a son under patronage, on the neck of a bull of magical poetry, knots in trees, trees for fire, fire when wished for earth, getting a boast, proclaiming of borders, borders declaring prosperity, green growth after spring, autumn increase of horses, a troop for the land, land that goes in strength and abundance, be it a strong, beautiful wood, long lasting a great boundary. Have you a story? Peace to the sky, be it so, lasting to the 9th generation. Then the second part is the bad part. Jeremy Irons, yes, Raymond de Lind. Jeremy Irons has another fabulous voice. Richard Burton. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century. She was afterwards among them, prophesying the years at the end of existence, and further promising each evil and lack in those years, and every plague and every vengeance, so that there she chanted her poem. Something seen is a world that shall not be pleasing. Summer deprived of flowers, cows deprived of milk, women deprived of modesty, men deprived of valour, conquests without a king, pointed bearded mouths of many oaths, sorrow, a lord without judgments, sea without profit, multitude of storms, excessively tonsured, tonsure is a hairstyle, a medieval hairstyle, forts, barren of structures, hollow, a stronghold coming from mistakes, a devastated time, many homeless, an excess of lords, joy in evil, a cry against traditions, bearded faces. Apparently, bearded faces were not so popular in the Middle Ages, excuse me, when this was written down. Of course, this may be much, much older. Equipment decaying, numerous exploits, finding battles, silent towards a spurred horse, numerous assemblies, treachery of lords' sons, covered in sorrow, crooked judgments of old men, false precedents of judges, a betrayer every man, a reaver every son. The son will go lay down instead of his father. The father will go lay down instead of his son. In law, each to his own kinsman. A person will not seek women out of his house. A long enduring evil period of time will be generated. A son betrays his father. A daughter betrays her mother. There you go. That is from Morgan Daimler's Caught My Chura, full translation into English of the aforesaid. War of the Worlds on vinyl, yes. What shall we finish off with? What shall we close out the day with, huh? Very prophetic, yes. Rowan Grove is looking forward to reading Return to Segish. I really hope that you enjoy it. Mike Naylor is on Facebook as well. That's okay, Mike. He says he's late. There's no problem. You if you so wish, you can definitely catch up on YouTube. That's no problem at all. Can we hear you read these words of famous Irish actor, Anthony? I don't know who you... That's very bold. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for a ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I have acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. Yes, I will hunt you and I will find you and I will... Yeah, do the whole thing. Island of the setting sun. Would that not be self-indulgent to read from my own work? You know, have you not heard enough? Have you had enough variety? Yeah. A whole lot, yeah. Will we read from the beginning to the end? Let me see. Is there any particular part that? Yeah. I don't know. Don't give away the milk for free, says Foodie. Absolutely. Yeah. We're nearly finished anyway, so we might as well close off. I don't know. I really don't. Okay, just a bit. Fine. Just I like the paper, because the paper in the early editions of Island the Setting Sun was kind of glossier. This is a kind of a more, I don't know, it's like a matte. It's not quite so glossy. It's got more of a sheen on it, like a matte. Sorry, forgive me for taking so long. I'll start reading something now when I find. So this is a little bit about Millmount in Drogheda. I'm glad to hear that some people have enjoyed themselves. It perhaps has been worthwhile from that point of view, at least. Back in the summer of 2000, Richard and I listened as the folklorist Caitlín Banny Charbara engaged us in one of many conversations about the ancient lore and history of the Boyne Valley. During that discussion, she emphasised to us that the Millmount's true history was often overlooked and that it was a greatly important place in ancient times. She was the first to assert to us that Millmount was, quote, one of the ancient mounds of Brunabonia, unquote. And she informed us that Amergin, the astronomer poet of the Milesians, who knew the ages of the moon and the place of the sunset, was said to be buried at Millmount. The idea that Millmount might be truly ancient was captivating, to say the least, but in reality it came as no surprise, given some of the things we had already learned about the place, such as the fact that, even the more modern written accounts of its history attribute its origins to ancient times. And this is a quote from one of the local history books. Millmount Fort is, as well as the town walls, ascribed to them, the Danes, as in the Vikings, who we now know were Norse, not Danish. The Irish Vikings apparently had Norse DNA. But may it not as well be ascribed to the Irish? Such places as this, which are found through the kingdom, are called by the Irish Danish raths or forts. May they not as well be called Irish raths, for in the opinion of many, such they are. That raths were in early use among the ancient Irish cannot be doubted, for according to an old Brehon law, it appears that particular chiefs alone were permitted to build them as a mark of distinction. John Dalton, in his 1844 History of Drogheda, said about Amergin, this warrior bard fell in battle in Meath, and is supposed to have been here buried on the southern shore of the River Boyne, where, according to the fashion of the time, the funeral pile, now known as the Millmount, was then elevated over his body. Millmount's link with Douth, Newgrange and Nouth could be found tentatively in some historical sources, which said the monuments ascribed to the Tuatha De Dananns are principally situated in Meath at Drogheda, Douth, Nouth and Newgrange. Dowlet is how Douth is spelt here. Millmount is the only obvious site in Drogheda which fits the bill, but it is on the south side of the Boyne, unlike Newgrange, Nouth and Douth, which are located on the north side of a spectacular loop in the Boyne, some 4 to 6 miles upstream of Drogheda. And none of those Bend of the Boyne mans can be seen from Millmount. Why? The answers would come, but first a fuller account of the written and spoken lore about the Millmount is needed. Sometime after the arrival of the Milesians at Inverculpa, the island of Ireland was divided into 2 kingdoms, and the Boyne River marked the division between those kingdoms, with Millmount acting as a kind of boundary marker between the kingdoms. The story of how the island came to be divided is recalled in Lara Gawala Éireann, the Book of Invasions, which is preserved in the Book of Leinster, a manuscript which dates from around 1150 AD. After the Tuatha De Danann were expelled to the Sea by the Milesians, the sons of the King of Spain took control of Ireland. At this time there was an argument about the kingship between Eramon and Ever, and Amergin was called to make peace between them. He said that the inheritance of the eldest of Dun, who had died on the expedition coming to Ireland from Spain, should go to the youngest, to Eramon, and his inheritance to Ever after him. Ever did not accept that, but insisted on dividing Ireland. Eramon agreed to do so. Accordingly, Ireland was divided in two between them, the northern half to Eramon from Shrúv Brian to the Boyne, the southern half to Ever from the Boyne to Tunclina. The millmount itself may have acted as a divisional marker. Old bardic tales, this is a quote, tell us of a mound having been fashioned in the plain of Mybray, where the kingdoms of Eramon and Hever met at the Boyne. Interesting stuff, I think you'll agree. Island of the Setting Sun, republished in last year in 2020, had been out of print for several years, and also now available on the Mythical Ireland website. As you can order a signed copy. The price includes postage and packaging, and I can post basically pretty much, I think, to anywhere in the world. So if you so wish, and you haven't got it in your collection, I'll paste in a link where you can get yourself a copy. I think that kind of brings us to a close. We're 6 minutes past 10, so I have lived up to my pledge for Ireland Reads today as an ambassador for Louth Library Service. It's been my great pleasure to read for you for 3 years. I'm just now beginning to get a little bit hoarse. So I'm going to go and get myself a good drink of water and a lozenge. Thank you for watching. It's been a great joy. Don't forget that Live Irish Myths in conversation with Mairead Carew about the British Israelites and the Ark of the Covenant allegedly being buried at the Hill of Tara is our next episode on Monday at 9 p.m. That is on Zoom, and you must pre-register to take part, but it's a free event. It's free to register and it's free to take part. I'm just going to paste the link in here now if I get a moment. Pardon me for this now for a moment. I'll paste it in as a comment beneath the videos on Facebook and on YouTube. I will, honestly. Apologies about this. Takes me just a moment. Oh, my lights are flickering here. I'll do that now. So don't forget to register for that. Looking forward to having a conversation with Mairead. She is an expert on the British Israelites and why the hell they thought it necessary to come to the Hill of Tara between 1899 and 1902 and butcher one of the monuments, one of the ancient monuments on the hill, the Rath Nashana, the Rath of the Synods, looking for the biblical Ark of the Covenant of all things. Why? What drove them to it? And of course, what we will also be discussing is what sort of opposition they met when they were here, and the nationalistic and religious tensions surrounding the whole incident, or series of incidents, should I say. Naomi, Serafina, thank you. Thank you all. Also, Seamus, thank you indeed. And thank you, Finn, as well. Yes. Robin is saying, thank Finn again. Yes, I will be sure to do that and to tell him. Deborah Williams says, registration done. Yes. Mad Men, says Seamus Maher. Don't forget to tune in. I think that'll be an interesting conversation. Yeah, enjoyed that variety tonight. Especially like the fact that I managed to get Tolkien, Sagan, Young, Campbell, George William Russell, Yeats, and Oscar Wilde. Oh, I mean, for goodness sake, how eclectic can you get? Anyway, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you have a good day, a good night, a good evening, a good morning. Don't forget to stay safe. I hope that you continue to be sensible during this pandemic. I have my little bottle of hand gel here, which I shall apply because I think I coughed and sneezed I certainly coughed a couple of times during the episode. And just when you're outside, to make sure you're wearing masks and social distance and all that. Keep yourself safe, because you do not want to get that nasty virus. While it's not having major effects on a lot of people that it infects, it is having major effects on some people, and it is killing a lot of people too. Keep yourself safe for the time being. I'm Anthony Murphy, ambassador for Ireland Reads. If you are in the States and you so wish to contribute to Ireland Reads, especially if you're of Irish descent or whatever, you don't have to be, but feel free to pledge to do some reading later today. And there's my 3 hours that I pledged ages ago to do, and I'm glad that I have done it. And all I can say is I hope that Ireland Reads becomes an annual event. In this day and age, with everything that's going on in the world, and with the unreliable sources of information that seem to populate the internet and social media, it seems to me that having a substantial library of books is a very good place to educate yourself. You will learn every day that you read, and it's such a wonderful experience. So thanks, everyone. Good night from the Mythical Ireland Library. If I am able to, I will try to do a live stream between now and Monday, perhaps out in the landscape. I need to get out and about. And now that Return to Segish has gone to print, I feel that I've been relieved a little bit, and perhaps might have a little bit of time for doing that. In the meantime, please, if you would, consider pre-ordering Return to Segish. I will have copies, hopefully, in my hands in about 3 weeks, perhaps even a little bit less, all going well. And we'll see you on Monday for Live Irish Myths in Conversation with Mairead Carew. Ikawa, good night, Colosov, sound sleep, Slán go fóill, bye for now. And most importantly of all, Tóg go bugé.